My mother-in-law is a demon. Why do I say that? Well, my husband passes away. She should be grieving like I am with my entire family, but oh no, she comes knocking on my door at all hours of the night saying I was supposed to be in his will, not you. She believes that I'm nothing more than a dirty cheater. Well, you know what I'm going to do about this, mother-in-law? Let me tell ya. My name's Maggie, and my husband's Dan. Well, he died of a heart attack about 3 months ago. I haven't even had the courtesy to grieve over his death. Why, may you ask? Because all my mother-in-law, Grace, is worried about is giving everything my husband owned before he died. Even though all those belongings belong to his, wife, which is me, of course, as well as our children. I can't get it in her head that it does not belong to her. My husband and Grace always were close, but more like I'm your mother, and I own you kind of close, as she told him everything to do when it came to everything he did. He had to buy her groceries, mow her lawn, take her to the salon, tend to her garden, and do all kinds of yard work that she wanted done that was, completely unnecessary. The way I saw it was, if you can't do it yourself, why must it be done? I spent the last 25 years arguing with that woman about her treating my husband like a workhorse, just for the heck of it. She replaced her husband, who died relatively young, with her eldest son, my husband. She would call and make him do stuff for her if she could not do it herself. The kicker of this is that he would be in big trouble if he did not answer his phone immediately. She would ice him out, get snippy with him, and ask why he did not pick up the phone when she called. It didn't matter if he was on the toilet. If that man did not answer his phone when she wanted exactly when, it was such a big deal. What always bothered me was that my husband always told his mom she was the only one in the will. When he would get home, though, he would sweet talk to me and say, "No, I was just telling her what she wanted to hear, babe," and that the kids and I were the ones truly in the will, and that we would get the house and the cars and everything, as well as the money that he had saved up over the years, but that did not stop her from harassing me every day of the week with phone calls, telling me she would get the best lawyer there was and ensure that she was the one who got everything, so she could get her son's belongings that were rightfully hers. Quite frankly, I got tired of arguing with her, so much in the fact one day, while she was trying to barge into my house to retrieve the gun Dan's father had given him before he passed away, I stopped her dead in her tracks and told her, no, I don't think so. Your husband gave your son that gun on our wedding anniversary, and you will not take that over my dead body." She stopped trying to ram her way into the house and then, with all her might, rammed me into the front door that was partially closed. She barely pushed me and I laughed in her face. I felt bad because she would be grieving together over such a fantastic son and husband is what we should be doing, and here we were playing a game of who's going to make it past the door fast enough. I told her I could not believe she was acting the way she was, right after her son had passed away. I told her I expected a warm, loving, grieving mother who wanted to protect her children, their mother, from the horrors of the death of their child. And with that, she spit in my face and said these exact words. "Some mother and wife you were. All you ever did was moan and groan about the housework and having to work 2 jobs. It took everything in me not to backhand her in the mouth, and I looked at her and I said, "You know, I was working my butt off the whole time he was alive because we didn't have enough money to take care of the house or the kids. And so, we could afford Dan's medical bills. Did you ever lend a helping hand with anything? Did you ever babysit when Dan was sick at the hospital? No, you didn't. You sat at home and acted like everything was fine, and if Dan were here now, I would do it again just to have him with us again." His mom rolled her eyes and told me she bet I didn't really even love him. And with that statement, I slammed the door in her face. I didn't know I had caught her index finger in the door jamb, and all I could hear was her scream, "My finger! My finger!" So I swung the door back open and saw her cradling her finger with blood running down her hand. Well, I offered to drive her to the hospital, but she told me to go. You know what? Well, yeah. And then took off down the walkway to her car. I did not feel slightly sorry for her because I knew what was coming. And just as I was psychic, I get a phone call from a lawyer representing Grace. He told me the house, cars, and the money left in the will belonged to my mother-in-law, and I laughed so hard and told him he's crazy. I also told him that we already went through the will with my husband's lawyer, and that he had left everything to my kids and me. And the lawyer told me that Grace had found a different will in her filing cabinet that my husband had signed, which left her everything. I told him we would see about that because I was present when my husband had his last will made up, and I witnessed him sign it. He told me we were just going to have to see about that in court, and I told him I'd see him there, and that he would have the fight of his life. Well, I slammed down the phone and panic began to set in. Did that old little jerk forge a will from my husband and try to take everything my husband left my kids and me? My son walked downstairs for breakfast, saw the sullen look on my face, and asked me if I was okay. I told him that his grandma was trying to steal everything that Daddy had left for us when he died, and to my surprise, he rolled his eyes and said, "Go figure. She's always been crazy. Don't worry, Mom, we'll win." I rubbed the top of his head and told him to get ready for school. I also told him I would call Dad's lawyer immediately, and he grabbed his sack lunch and skipped out the front door. I slumped down into the kitchen chair and contemplated what to do. And that's when I remembered the camera that we had set up in my husband's room. Well, it was kind of like his death bedroom. He spent most of his time in his bed in the room, hooked up to these monitors and fluids. His heart was so weak he just could not get up and move around, and when we reviewed his will the last time, his Aunt Teal and Cousin Amber were both present, and myself. The entire moment was caught on that camera. I never understood why he wanted a camera in his room recording while he was just perishing, and I have no idea that a camera would be the one thing that helped us win this fight. I hurried up. I grabbed the phone off the hook and called Aunt Teal. It felt like the phone was going to ring forever. And her son Jason finally picked up and said, "Hey, bud, is your mom home?" And all I could hear was him pull the phone away from his mouth and yell, "Ma, phone." And then he talked back into the phone and told me that she would be on in just a minute. So I thanked him and I waited. "Hello, this is Teal." As soon as she answered, my heart began to race. Hey, this is Maggie," I said, knowing she would be wondering why on earth I was calling her, but she kindly asked me why I was calling. "Well, do you remember that day in my husband Dan's room when you, your daughter, Amber, and I were in there while Dan was going over his new will?" "Oh yeah, of course I remember. He was making sure the kids and you were the only ones on the will, and he wanted to do it in front of his camera, and I was relieved when I saw that." "Thank God," I sighed with the relief. "Why? What's wrong?" I tried to start talking, but I was talking so fast that it all got jumbled together, so Teal told me to slow down, start over. And I explained to her that Dan's mom was trying to say that Dan left everything to her in the will, and that she even found a will that Dan had signed at her house in one of her filing cabinets. Teal was shocked. "Oh, no. Well, you have video proof right before he passed away of him writing the will, honey. And wait, didn't we even hold the will up to the camera so it would show who was on the will in case something like this ever happened?" I almost fell over backwards and yelled, "Yeah, that's right," because we were worried his mother would try to pull a stunt like this. Because Dan always told her he would leave everything in the will to her just to shut her up. Because she was impossible to deal with. She thought everything of his belonged to her. That man could not even rest in peace when he was sick, because she would always be having him do work. Teal agreed with me, and then she told me not to worry. We would figure this all out together. I thanked her and hung up the phone, and that's when the doorbell rang. After my encounter with Grace, I did not even want to answer the door. But I did, and guess who it was? Yeah, you guessed it, Grace. I opened the door, and I first noticed her bandaged finger, and she was standing there with her hand on her hip. And I asked her what she wanted, and she said that there was a glass figurine that belonged to her in Dan's bedroom that she wanted to retrieve. A glass figurine, huh? And she rolled her eyes and said, yeah, a glass figurine. I gave it to him when he got sick about 5 months ago. Can I go and get it? I paused, thought about it, and then it hit me. I could not allow her to go anywhere near that room because the camera with the tape in that video of the will signing was still in it. For all I know, she would go in there and steal it. So I asked her, what does it look like? And she starts to get nervous. She finally freaked out and said, Well, I can't remember what it looks like, girl. I'll just know it when I see it. I cocked my head to the side, looked her up and down, and said, okay, I'll let you go up there, but I'll be up there with you the whole time because I don't trust you, Grace. You already tried to weasel your way into my husband's will that you know darn well he left to the kids and me. And she looked down with this evil smile and said, oh, that, well, I have to get what's rightfully mine now, don't I? You would do the same. You mean, your marriage was a joke. So why should you get anything? I bit my lip and then I told her if she thought she would get a dime or even a piece of furniture of his, she's absolutely crazy. And I told her that I had a little trick up my sleeve that specifically showcases my husband signing his will with lots of witnesses and leaves everything to my kids and me. And with that, I slammed the door. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Man, Grace is a nightmare. Let's just go ahead and jump into the first update. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Here it is. I wasn't sure if I should write an update about this, but things have escalated between Grace and me. She's been harassing me every single day. She comes to my work and makes a scene, and she'll literally come into my office and yell obscenities at me and point at me when customers come into the store and tell them that I'm stealing the things her son left for her in the will. And then, when they would tell her that they were sorry, they would walk past me giving me these dirty looks. Grace would lean towards me and just say, this whole town will know what kind of disgraceful woman you really are. Do you really think you can outsmart me? I finally had to call security and have them come escort her out the building, but it never made a difference. She even started showing up at my son's school. She would tell them that she was his grandma and that she was there to pick him up for a doctor's appointment. Well, the good thing is that my son knew better than to leave her because he knows all too well about her antics, but he was terrified because even after he explained the situation to the school, they tried to get him to leave with her anyways. And why, you ask? Grace had a note telling the school she would pick him up with my forged signature. I had to go to my son's school and tell the principal that that woman would never be allowed to pick up my children, ever. And not only that, but no one except me could pick them up for any reason unless I came to the school and instructed them to do so. They knew I was not too happy by the anger in my voice and probably the look on my face, and I was furious that Grace would try to pick up my child from school, and only God knows what she even had planned. She just can't be trusted. So, I made a little trip over to her house to have a little chit-chat. I sped down Main Street and parked directly in her driveway, which I knew would drive her crazy, and I stomped my way up to her door. But before I could even knock, she already opened up a door and, well, she was sharpening a knife. To what do I do the pleasure? What the heck did you show up to my son's school for? Oh, I was only going to take him to his father's grave to place flowers on it. When was the last time you went up there? Her answer caught me off guard, and I did not know how to respond. I thought about it and I told her we went up there just about a month ago. She says, "Yes, and the flowers on the grave have all wilted and died just like you will one day. Maybe even sooner if you don't give me what's mine." My mouth dropped. Oh, it was instinctful, so I hurried up and shut it. What this terrible woman did not know is that I had my phone on voice record in my pocket. Therefore, it was recording our entire conversation. Hey, I have to have as much evidence that this woman was out to get me as I could, and she was not making it very hard to get. Then she said something that I was not expecting. "You do realize I know the boy is not Dan's child, don't you?" She said as she sharpened the knife while gazing at the blade. What? How could she possibly know that? No one, including Dan, knew about the affair. All I could think to say was, "That's not true, and what the heck would tell you such a thing?" She laughed and told me she didn't need someone to tell her anything. When my son was conceived, she saw me leave my home with a nicely dressed man in a Buick Regal at 12 a.m. Shocked and furious, I turned on my heels, got into my car, and left. Update number 2. After finding out the news that Grave knew about my son not being Dan's, I was truly at a loss. But I decided to go over to Teal's house to tell someone about my affair for the first time in 13 years. I slowly drove over to her house, not ready to reveal the secret I thought I would take to my grave. But I needed to help fight against Grace if I was going to win in court. I pulled up at her apartment and put my head on my steering wheel. I was unprepared for this conversation, however, I needed someone on my side to help me devise a plan for revenge, to get Grace back for all that she's caused my family and me. I got out of the car, walked up to her front door, and I made sure to come at a time when our kids were in school, so no little ears would be hearing to eavesdrop and hear about my downfall. I rang the doorbell, and Teal and her vivacious self opened the door as if she had skipped the whole way. Her smile could have lit up the entire universe if it had gone black. However, as soon as she saw the look on my face, her smile seemed to disappear, and she said, "Oh, Maggie, what's the matter? Here, come in. So I reluctantly walked in, and she gestured me towards her love seat while she sat down in her recliner. All I could manage to say was that something terrible had come up with Grace. And Teal said, "Oh no, now what has she done?" I looked at her with tears in my eyes, and I explained how she tried to pick up my son from school, and then how I confronted her about it, and how she knew the one secret I've kept from Dan all these years. Well, Teal looked like she was about to cry and asked, "Can I trust you with this secret, Teal? To never speak a word about it to anyone, even though it'll probably come up in court? Please, Teal." "Oh, I need your help to keep the belongings my husband left for my family and me." And Teal wiped her eyes furiously, straightened her posture, and said, "Yes, of course, you can trust me with anything. I know how awful Grace has been to you and even to her own sons. I will help as much as possible, I promise." And after she said that, I spilled the beans on, well, everything. How I was overwhelmed with work, the kids, Dan's health problem, everything, and how I just started using social media, and some man, well, not just some man, but a very good-looking man, who showed so much interest in me, messaged me, and we talked every day, and we decided to meet up one night. And one thing led to the other, and well, you know, we got intimate, and it was around that time Zach, my eldest son, was conceived. I told her I never talked to that man again because the guilt ate me alive. I hated what I've done, and the fact that Zach could not be Dan's broke my heart, and with his health failing, I didn't think he could have handled the truth. Therefore, I never told him. And believe me, I regret it to this day, but I guess Grace was outside of my house that night that the man picked me up. Even strangers have pointed out how Zach doesn't look anything like the rest of us. But Dan never suspected a thing, and I think Grace was going to tell Zach about the affair that day she tried to pick him up from school, and I don't know why. or how it could possibly help with her court case, but Teal, I need you to testify against Grace about Dan signing the will right in front of you. He wrote that will one day before he passed away, you know. So whatever will Grace thinks that she has is void, because I had a lawyer make the will official. Teal agreed to help me testify, and we spent the next hour going over what we would say in court. Update number 3. After I left Teal, that day we scheduled a meeting at my house, yesterday, to go over the plan to take down Grace. But Grace was not done harassing me. She went as far as to tell my youngest son Abel that it was my fault his dad died. My son was distraught and I could barely console him. The bad thing is, I don't even know how she was able to talk to him. I don't know if she stopped him on his walk home from school or if she called him on the phone when I was out in the garden. I just don't know. But it took a lot of convincing to get him to believe that I was not the cause of his father's death. I had to break out all his medical records and explain all the conditions right there to him. I even gave Dan, providing physician, a call, and had him explain Dan's death to him. I'm going to have to send him a thank you basket for doing that, I know it, but anyways. Teal came over, and we sat down, and I gathered the videotape, the will, and the voice recordings that I had of Grace threatening to kill me if she didn't get what she wanted from what my husband had left us when he passed. I put the videotape in the VHS player and watched through it. It was so hard to watch him as he lay in the bed withering away. I started bawling my eyes out and Teal told me to go in the other room. She would find the spot on the tape where we were all standing around watching him write out the will. Therefore, I stepped into the kitchen and waited. "Found it!" Teal yelled from the other room. So I hurried and ran into the living room and watched it with her, and it showed everything perfectly. All of us surrounding him, witnessing him write out everything that went on to each person, and we zoomed in right there on the signing of the will. So no one could say he was just writing on a piece of paper, and I could have sworn I've taken it to the lawyer to have him make it official, but to my wonderful surprise, he was standing right there in the doorway in the video. And once Dan was done writing and signing his name, the lawyer came over and made the document official. That evidence was enough to completely destroy her in court. And then I had a great idea. Well, Teal, do you think your daughter Amber would also testify in court about the will since she was in the room when it was signed? And Teal thought about it for a second and said, well, she's away at college about an hour away, but I will give her a call right now. I thanked her profusely, and then I got onto my laptop and got set up for my smartphone was linked to it, and then I downloaded the voice recording of Grace threatening me about the will. I downloaded it to a USB drive. That way I could easily give it to the judge to have him place it in a computer in the courtroom to play it for everyone to hear. But then my heart sank. What if Grace says that's not her voice on the recording? So I come up with a plan to tell Grace and tell her I would bring over the figurine that she tried to receive from my house that one day, and I would have my little pinpoint camera placed on my jacket, so I could videotape her talking. That way, if she does deny being the one talking on the recording, I'll have the video of her talking as well, which will sound exactly the same. She won't be able to get out of it. Well, once Teal was off the phone, I told her my plan, and she thought it was absolutely brilliant. She told me that Amber would be willing to testify, and I hugged her and told her I had to go to Grace's house now. So I asked her to lock up on her way out, and I grabbed the ugly little figurine, which I'll be honest with you, my husband hated. He said it freaked him out, but anyways. I drove over to Grace's house, pinpoint camera in place of my jacket, and I rang that doorbell. She came to the door and said, "Have you figured out if your house, cars, and money are worth your life yet?" She laughed while throwing her head back, and I just handed her the figurine and said, "I'll see you in court. Hope you're ready to lose because you have one heck of a fight on your hands, and you don't even know what you're about to walk into." I turned around and got into my car and sped off. Update number 4. Hey guys, it's been a week since the court date, and I cannot wait to get on here and tell you guys about it. I'm sorry that this update's taken so long to come out, but so much has happened. Well, Let's begin in the courtroom. Everyone that was supposed to testify showed up, thank God, and little old Grace was all by her lonesome on the other side of the aisle, just her lawyer and herself. The judge let Grace's lawyer go first, and literally all he had for a case was that, well, Miss Grace found a will her son had drawn up in a filing cabinet with a date that read March 23rd, 2002. He tried to tell the judge that was the most recent will that he made. Then it was my lawyer's turn. He said, "Your Honor, this woman who sits across the aisle is narcissistic, greedy, and an old woman. I have a videotape of the defendant's husband, Dan, right there on his deathbed one day before he passes. As you'll see the timestamp of the video, sir, of him writing out his last will. He had 4 witnesses in that room that day when he signed it, and would you like to take a look at it?" And the judge told him to go ahead, show it to us. So he did. And he saw everything my husband wrote in the will, specifically leaving everything to my kids and myself. And the close-up of him signing it, and the judge turned away from the monitor and told Grace's lawyer, "Well, that right there is enough for me to judge in their favor." And then my lawyer said, "But wait, Judge, there's more. There's a video recording, voice recording, and 2 witnesses to justify." And the judge said, "Very well, let's hear from the witnesses." So Teal testified about Amber testifying that Dan wrote out the will specifically to give it to his wife and children, and nowhere on the will was Grace ever mentioned. Afterward, the judge heard the voice recording of Grace threatening me if I did not just give her the stuff that was rightfully hers in the will. And then the icing on the cake. The video recording of me giving Grace back her figurine, and the judge witnessed her ask me if my house, cars, and money were worth my life. The judge turned back away from the monitor and told Grace that she was lucky he did not send her to jail for this threat. But she would be put on probation for 5 years, and restraining orders would be put in place immediately for my whole family to keep Grace away from us. The only reason we got the restraining order was that my lawyer mentioned the school incident and how Grace told my son that I was the reason his father died. So, that day, we won. I got to keep my home, cars, and the money, which means life can go as normal as it possibly can. I sure do miss Dan, and I know he's smiling down on me right now because he never did get along with his mother. And if he knew that she put us through this whole time, it's hard telling what he would have done to stop it. Teal and Amber both have become like sisters to me. We meet up every Monday and have lunch, and I even gave them both $10,000 from the money of the will for helping me defeat Grace. Of course, neither of them wanted to take it, but I placed the money in a trust fund. So, they get payments every month whether they like it or not. My kids and I are living perfect lives now. It's not the same without their daddy, but it's definitely better without their narcissistic grandmother coming around every day. The story's moral is that greed is a sin, and it'll cause you to do some crazy stuff. Just hope and pray that you never try to hurt others just for a bit of cash. If you're meant to have it, I guess you will.
So this story had so many avenues. It was crazy, full of drama, everything you can imagine. But I'm caught up in the comment section on this one because, well, it seemed like every single person was on OP's side through the first few updates. But the second OP releases the news that, well, she cheated, and the son is not who we thought it was. It seemed like everybody changed. Everyone in the comment section was saying, see, the mother-in-law really isn't that evil, she must have been onto something. She knew the true intentions of OP, and we're simply not getting the full side of the story, and neither did the judge. Well, I want to know from you guys, because this story was so deep. What would you do if you were OP and your secret gets aired to the world and you have to come clean? I want to know also what you would do if you were on the mother-in-law side and you just think, my son passed away and now this dirty cheater is getting all of his stuff and I'm just left out to dry. So yeah, there's really sticky situation on both sides. Let me know where you fall. Whose side do we take on this one? Help me out, guys. Let's discuss it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. My name's Mr. Reddito if you're new to the channel. I release a story every single day. Hit that subscribe button for more daily videos, and remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya!